Okay guys, we are going to start setting up our sleeve so that we can put it into our bodice. We've got our sleeve pattern piece cut out here, and normally we would have two of these because usually you have two symmetrical sleeves in any garment, but because this is just an exercise, we're just doing one. So I've got my one sleeve. This is the sleeve cap up here, basically what'll sit on the shoulder. These two sides will come together and that becomes the armpit. And then this will get sewn all the way down, and then we've got a nice long sleeve. So the first thing we're going to do is sew our little tiny elbow dart, and this you don't always see in a sleeve, but you see in something that's really fitted, like a tailored piece, just a little tiny pinch right at the elbow. So I can see my little tiny blue dart point, and I'm going to pinch these together. And because I'm only doing one right now, it doesn't really matter which side I pinch towards, but imagine if I was sewing two of these, I'd want to make sure I mirrored them. So whichever direction I pinch this towards on one, I sort of do the opposite on the other side. I feel like it would make more sense if we had real fabric and we had two. So again, here's my dart point. I am just going to fold that right in half. There we go. And here's my notches for the end of my dart. And this is just such a tiny, tiny little dart, but you do sometimes see it, and it's always nice to practice our darts. So I'm just going to sew from here off the edge right to there to capture that dart. So let's get my machine all ready. Put that presser foot down, needle down, walk those first 1 or 2 stitches, pull out my pin, and let's see if I can go right off the edge there. There we go. Presser foot up, needle up, and there we go. I've come pretty close to the edge. It's about a stitch away. So let's tie this off into a double knot so that that dart doesn't come unraveled, and then we're going to press this. In this case, right, we've said we always press all our darts towards the center front or towards the center back. There is no center front or center back on a sleeve, so in this case we're going to press it down. Sometimes that's going to be the situation. So just kind of think about what you're sewing and what would make the most sense. But we are going to press, tie it up on both sides, press our dart down, so away from this cap, down towards what becomes the hem, okay? So, oops, go over to the iron, and I am just going to push that down and carefully go into that point so that it's really subtle. There we go. So I'll have this subtle bend here around the elbow. And next thing I'm going to do is sew my two side seams together. So this notch on the other side where I did not have my dart is what's going to match up to this notch here from my dart. Okay, so that's going to be how we're going to match these up. So see, I've got this pressed down. I am going to pin right through all that dark thickness to make sure it stays pressed down. And then I'm going to go ahead and pin the rest, matching my sides. And ultimately we will sew this at 1/2 inch. And I have come down here and I'm noticing this doesn't match up at the end. Now this is my bottom hem. Let me see if it matches up here. It does match up here at the other side. Here, I'll just pin this side too, just to show you. It's matching up at, like I said, what would be the armpit really nicely. And that's definitely much more important of a place to match up because that involves the fit. But when I get down here, looks like I'm like almost a ½ inch off, a ¼ inch to a ½ inch off. Not really sure what happened there. I'm gonna set that up to my bad pattern making. So maybe I should have extended this a little bit more. I'm not really sure where I went wrong, but don't stress this right now. Sometimes if you're off a little bit on what is the bottom, what is the hem of your garment, this is at least something we can easily fix when we hem it, because we'll turn it under and then we'll turn it under again. So we can always clean this up. So I will go ahead and sew this at a ½ inch seam allowance all the way down. I've got it pinned, I've got my machine all ready. I'll start up here at the top. So I'll put my presser foot down, put my needle down, sew the first few stitches, and then I can pull these pins out as I go as well. So there we go. And I'm just gonna sew nice and slow and take out these pins as I go. And this is just one long straight line. Trying not to sew over the pins if I can, since it sometimes has a tendency to break or bend your needle or do something bad to your garment. I do have a slight little bend there right around where I've got the dart. But ultimately a very straight line all the way down. And I'll just sew right off that edge. So needle up, presser foot up, pull out any pins. And here I've got my ½ inch sewn all the way. And just to make sure I don't have any tension locked in there, I always take my fingers and just push towards one direction before I tie anything off, just to work out any slight tension or gather that I inadvertently put in there. So I'll go ahead and tie this off at what is the armpit, that side with the rounded sleeve cap, so that doesn't fray on us. And I might even just leave it down here at the hem for now, or what I'll do, because this side is like not the right side, I'll pull it towards one side to the shorter side, right? And I'll tie it off here. And that way, if I need to end up actually just clipping off that piece of fabric to even it out, I don't end up clipping through the seam that I just sewed. Okay, so now I've got a sleeve. You can start to see it, right? You can imagine. I'm gonna put my arm in here. This is always what I do, like to test it, right? There's go. My arm goes in there. So what I need to do is press this seam that I just sewed open. If we were on campus, I could show you a sleeve arm, which is like a really skinny ironing board that actually fits inside this sleeve, which makes pressing it really easy. But since we're at home, we don't have a sleeve arm. So what we're gonna have to do is kind of fold it so that the seam is sort of in the center of the sleeve and try to press it without inadvertently pressing hard creases in the sides, okay? So we're just gonna do our best. I'm gonna start down at the skinnier end of the sleeve, and I'm gonna finger press it, so I just kind of like, you know, press it with my fingers. And then what I'm doing is just carefully gliding that, trying not to like press too hard. I'll flip it around now and keep pressing here. Oops, there we go. Just trying not to press on my two sides of my sleeve so that, again, I don't put any creases that I don't really want in there, which is really tough. You could also try to like shoot steam at it. That might work, so that you don't have to press hard. You might be able to slide something in there that you can press with. But so my goal is, oh look, I created, look at that hard crease. I did not want to do that. And if that happens, look, I can just move it over so that that hard crease is in the middle, and see if I can iron that out. Possibly. Looks like I made another crease in this side when I did it. Oh my goodness. Yes, pressing sleeves are hard at home, for sure. Oh my gosh, this is just like crease city. I might be better shooting some steam at it periodically. But ultimately, it's coming along. Okay, so I've got this pressed open, that's really key. And now at this point, we could actually turn it to the right side from here on out. I like to turn it and work with it this way. So if I put this sleeve on, I've got the sleeve cap up here. This seam would be on the inside of my body. And I would put it in on my right arm because my elbow is going to be here, and that's where that dart is. And then my hand comes out here. The other indicator that this side of the sleeve goes towards the back is that up here in my sleeve cap, I've got a double notch right here. On this side of my sleeve cap, I have a single notch. So that's also the difference. You always know this is the back of your sleeve that goes towards your back, and this is the front that goes towards your front, because this has a single notch and this has a double notch. And then there's also one notch right up at the top of the cap of the sleeve. So the next thing we're going to do, in order to set this sleeve cap into our armhole of our bodice, is we've got to gather this up a bit, because what we need to do is get this two-dimensional piece of fabric here to be rounded like a shoulder, right? The shoulder has a little meat to it right here. It has a round hump right here, right? As I start to gather with my hands, you can see it almost becoming a shoulder, right? But when it lays flat, it does not look like a shoulder. So what we do is we sew a stitch here that is not a permanent stitch. It's like a basting stitch, but what it actually is a gathering stitch. And really in this case, we're not really gathering it per se, in that we're not really taking a bunch of fabric and putting it into a small amount. We're doing what's called easing it in. So it's similar to a gather stitch, but what it is an ease stitch. And it means that you're going to ease this into the other side. And what is going on is that this shape is a few inches larger than our bodice armhole, and that's done on purpose. That is so we can create a cap. We can create a rounded shape that we ease in to our armhole, okay? So it's all for a reason. It's all by design. So what we're gonna do is sew a stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance so that you'll never see it from the outside of the garment. Again, when we sew in for real, we'll sew at a 1/2 inch, which will be here. But right now we're going to sew like a basting stitch that's a non-permanent stitch, you know, doesn't matter, close to the edge at a 1/4 inch. And we're going to sew from this notch all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, all the way around to this notch. So the double notch, all the way around the cap to the single notch. We are not going to sew from here to here, which crosses through our armpit, that seam that we just sewed. This we would always want to be flat. This is not an area right under your arm, under the armpit of your sleeve. This is not an area where you want a bunch of excess fabric. You want that to be really smooth and to just sit flat. So we are not going to touch that. So just thinking about this logically. We are going to sew a stitch from here all the way to here. Okay, I'm going to show you what I mean. So I'll start from this side, from this double notch. I could even start from the top of the double notch, not down here. Start from up there, okay? And I'm going to sew this at a 1/4 inch from the edge, which pretty much means I am going to put my presser foot down and sew right in line with the edge of my presser foot. I don't need to pin anything because I'm not sewing to anything. I'm just sewing a stitch in of itself. Another thing to note, because this is a stitch that we're going to gather up and pull on basically, and it's a kind of a basting stitch, let's go ahead and change our stitch length for this. So we've got our stitch length right now set at 3, which is good for general purpose sewing, but let's set it to 4, which is larger. We'll make a nice fat basting stitch, similar to what we did when we were doing our hand stitches. So I am just gonna go nice and slow and steady, and I am turning the fabric as I go so that I am following this curved shape and staying right on the edge. And if I need to stop every now and then and adjust, once you've got your needle down, you can pick the presser foot up to be able to turn around this corner. So needle down, I can pick my presser foot up and turn this corner and make sure I am sewing at 1/4 inch from the edge, which is right in line with the edge of the presser foot. Okay, so needle up, let me pull this, and now I've got a stitch. I'm not going to clip anything. I'm also going to make sure I give myself several inches here. I'm going to pull on this. It's going to be like a drawstring to a trash bag or a purse. So I've got this 1/4 inch seam, you see, that follows the shape all the way around, and then it also goes here, okay? It does not go into the armpit. That is untouched. All right, it's just on the top, just on the cap. Now to gather this up, I'm going to take just one of the threads, usually the bottom thread, like the underneath one, the bobbin, sort of not the top. I'm going to take one, and I am going to gather this fabric up. See how I'm doing that? It's just, like I said, like a drawstring. You don't want to break this, so you want to be kind of delicate and gentle with it, okay? You want to baby it. But we don't have much to gather, so it shouldn't be too difficult. And then here was my center. So basically I'm going to gather to about the center and stop, okay? So I've got that gathered up. And now I'm going to do the same thing from the other side. And I do it that way just so that I don't run the risk of accidentally snapping my thread by trying to gather it all on one side. It just like takes some of the tension off. So now I'm going to take the bottom thread on this side and do the same thing. See how I'm just pushing that? It kind of takes you back to when we were pulling threads, pulling our grain threads, right? Like how it sort of gathered up the fabric. And then I'm going to go to the center with that. And I'm over gathering. I know I'm not going to need this. This almost looks like a puff sleeve, right? But already you can see now I've got this shoulder shape, right? You can imagine this is sewn in to the shoulder seam, and a shoulder and an arm could now fit in here. It becomes round. You start to see it right away, okay? So that's pretty cool. So this is the prep of the sleeve. We just leave these hanging for now. We don't want to touch them. We don't want to lose them because we will definitely make adjustments to this gather as we put it into the bodice. But your sleeve is all prepped and ready to go. And now we can go back and get our bodice and we'll attach this to it.